In the previous videos, we have discussed what a buyer persona is, how it is different from a target market, and why a buyer persona is needed. However, we have yet to discuss how you go about creating a buyer persona. We have already seen that a buyer persona needs to be created based on real data, not assumptions. You can make some educated speculations where necessary, but most of the information needs to be confirmed by research. In this video, we will talk about the different sources of data that you can use to build your buyer persona. Here is the buyer persona that we have created for our hotel. Some of those facts have been based on educated guesses, based on the experience that I have as a hotel manager. But most facts have been gathered through primary and secondary data. If I create a buyer persona based on real facts, i.e. research, then my buyer persona is more likely to feel more real, and all the decisions that I make will more likely to be successful. But where do you get the information that will help you create your buyer persona? The first source of information is secondary data. There are a lot of reports, free or paid for, that give you insight about consumers. Here are just a few of those reports that are available to you and that I would encourage you to read. They contain already a lot of information that will be useful for you to create your buyer persona. Let's take this book as an example. The company Leonardo has been researching about needs and wants from hotel consumers, and they have been categorizing that information according to the type of travelers. Here, for example, we have information about who business travelers are and what they want and what they're looking for in a hotel. We have here the same information, but this time for leisure travelers, what they're important and what they're looking for. Here we have information about millennial travelers, who they are, what they want, what interests them in a hotel. So you want to read these reports and take the information from there that you can then use to create your buyer persona. One of the most important sources of information that is available to you is coming directly from consumers. They like to share their experience online, so go and read it. I would encourage any hotelier to check their TripAdvisor page and read the comments of the consumers about what they like and didn't like about your hotel and their experience. But don't only look at your own page. Another important source of information can also come from the TripAdvisor pages from your direct competitors, as they are mostly targeting customers with similar needs and wants. By reading their comments, this will give you a lot of information about their expectations about a stay in a hotel. And you can definitely use this information for creating your buyer persona. The employees of the hotel, and mostly the customer-facing ones, are a great source of information. Employees know a lot about your customers. They face and answer their questions and queries all the time. Ask employees what their questions are. What are the questions they ask all the time? What is it that they want to know about the product or the destination? This will give you a lot of insight into what the customers want to know. And again, this will give you a lot of details which will help you to create your buyer persona. Talking directly to a guest or to potential guest is the best way to get information about your buyer persona. This is where you ask them directly the questions that you need to know for each different section of the template. It is better to also have a relatively large sample and maybe talk to 10 different people for each persona. And you want to identify the most common information between all people. For example, if every single person you interview tells you that they are using Facebook, I know, pretty obvious, then this is the information that you will put down in the media preferences of your buyer persona. As David Merman Scott says here, you want to know as much as you can about your customer. And here are some of the questions that you might want to ask to get you started with an interview. But these are just a few ideas. You might want to change and expand on those questions, depending on the situation and who you are interviewing. Finally, a survey can be used if you want to be sure about your buyer persona, as you will be asking a large sample of people to confirm your assumptions. But I would recommend you that you use a survey only after you've done the previous 4 steps. A survey is normally not done to find out information, but rather to confirm the assumptions that you've made based on your readings and interviews. I am not expecting you to conduct a fully fledged research for creating the buyer persona of your communication plan. It is not necessary for you to conduct any form of primary research in the form of an interview or a survey. But if you want to do it, you still can. As a minimum, I would expect you to have conducted some reading about consumers' trends in hospitality as mentioned in point number 1. Also, reading comments on TripAdvisor could also be a very good idea to identify needs, wants, and expectations of your buyer persona. I have already shown this reference, but again, if you want to know more on how to conduct research to find information about your buyer persona, there is no better source than Rivela's book. I hope that you have a better understanding of what a buyer persona is and how to conduct research about finding information to complete your buyer persona. Later on, we will learn how we can use this information identified here to communicate with your audience on our social media channels.